I'm on the road in the United States for a few days now, and I also spent many days on American highways. And I have to say, it's a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah, traffic is wild in the United States, especially when you're near major cities. The streets are much wider than everything I know in Europe. Everybody's going everywhere with the car, and as a European you also have to get used to the traffic rules. For example, that it's allowed to overtake on the right, or that you can usually turn right at red lights, and also the rules for stop signs and who has the permission to drive first are a little different here than in Europe.
But there's this one thing I find even more exciting when it comes to American traffic, and that is what you can see right behind me. Right, I'm talking about American trucks.
Even if you've never been to the United States, you might have seen this before, for example in American films. US semi-trucks are very different from those that drive in Europe. They are much larger and longer. Here in the US they also drive faster, and perhaps the most interesting thing about these US semi-trucks, they have a hood directly in front of the cab, a nose, just like a normal car. And that is a complete difference to European trucks, which are usually flattened at the front.
Today, in this video, I would like to answer the question, why? Why is that? Why do American semi-trucks have a nose and the European ones don't? Is it just because they like this design better, or is there a bigger story behind it? Well, let's find out. Before we can answer the question why US semi-trucks look so different than those in Europe, we first have to learn about the history of those trucks. Because the first truck ever was not invented here in the United States of America. It was invented in my home country, in Germany, by a man called Gottlieb Daimler.
That happened in the year 1896, and this is what the vehicle looked like back then. The world's first truck was based on a type of horse trailer which was converted. In the rear there was a 4-horsepower 2-cylinder engine with a displacement of 1.06 liters. In later models it was moved under the driver's seat. Well, and if we take a closer look at this vehicle, we will notice somehow it has a certain similarity to the trucks that drive around on European roads today. So the driver's cab, if you can call it like that, was right at the front.
This design decision also has a name: forward control, which means the engine of the truck is somewhere in the vehicle, but definitely not in front of the cab. So the driver has the road basically right in front of his nose. The first trucks ever invented were forward control vehicles or cab-over vehicles, but over time the truck manufacturers became a bit more creative.
Daimler, for example, here in 1898. You can see that the engine is no longer in the rear of the vehicle or under the driver's seat, but in front of the driver's cab. The vehicle already has a hood. Trucks like this one from Benz in 1912 followed later. It also has a snout.
If we talk about those nose trucks, there are actually two different models. The first one is the long hood truck, where the engine really is in front of the driver's cab. And the other one is the short hood truck, where the engine is also right in front of the driver's cab, but also a little bit inside the cab or below the driver's seat. Well, and those two models also became really popular in Europe.
The advantage of those long and short hood trucks is quite clear. The engine is much easier to reach if you need to repair something. Until the end of the 1950s, trucks with hoods up to 2 meters long were driving on German roads. After World War II, trucks became more and more technically sophisticated and quickly became the #1 means of transport. Many goods could be brought to their destination faster and, above all, more directly with trucks than with the Federal Railway, for example. At the time, these long hood vehicles were allowed to be 20 meters long and were allowed to carry a weight of 40 tons on the road.
Well, but even though those trucks were super successful, they also had some disadvantages. Because they were getting bigger and heavier, also the German roads were damaged quite badly.
And there was another problem. Because those trucks were so successful, they had a competitive advantage over the German state-owned railway. This was a thorn in the side of the government at that time. They wanted to make the railway more competitive again and bring more goods by rail instead of by road.
So, something had to be done about this heavy and long vehicles, and the man who finally did that was a politician called Hans-Christoph Seebohm.
He was the transport minister in the government of Chancellor Konrad Adenauer back then, and he issued a new regulation. From then on, trucks on German roads were only allowed to be 14 meters long and weigh 24 tons. This is a drastic cut and much less than before. We remember, before it was 20 meters and 40 tons. This new regulation immediately led to huge protests among shipping companies. Many feared their own ruin because the trucks simply could no longer transport as much as before. And they also feared that the transport business would then simply no longer be profitable.
Well, spoiler alert, all of that did not happen. Because once again, one more time, the truck manufacturers became a little creative. And one special truck model celebrated its big comeback. You already know what I'm talking about, right? Right, the forward control vehicle or cab-over truck.
This truck model was inherently much shorter than the long hood truck. And well, what happens when you shorten the tractor unit of a semi-truck? Right, you can increase the loading area. So from then on, the manufacturers installed the engine under the driver's cab, no longer in front of it. This made repairs much more complicated, but in addition to the reduced length, it also had some advantages. For example, the truck became much clearer and the truck drivers also sit much higher in the cab so they can see better. However, this initially caused protests. The truck drivers feared for their safety as the rubber zone of these vehicles is much smaller. The engine also produced unbearable heat under the driver's cab, especially in the first models. Over time, however, the models continued to improve, and by the 1970s at the latest, those cab-over trucks finally became established. Since then, hardly any truck with a different design has been seen on German roads again. In the United States, the situation was always a little different. There are length restrictions for semi-trucks too, but these only apply to semi-trailers, not to the tractor unit. This means that shipping companies can choose their own tractor, it doesn't matter how long it is. And also the truck culture in the USA may be a little different than in Germany. When truckers drive through the country, they often literally live in their trucks. And of course, for this use, it's much better if the cabins are spacious and not as small as in the cab-over truck. Anyway, in Germany, the short tractor became established, and a few years after the so-called Seebohm regulations, truck sizes were also harmonized in the rest of Europe, and the German model was used as a basis. With these new European regulations, the length grew a little again at that time. Instead of 14 meters, now 16.5 meters in length were permitted, but the end of the long hooded semi-trucks in Europe was still sealed.
However, all of that does not mean that the nose truck is dead. Well, here in the US it's definitely not that, but also not in Europe. There are discussions between experts about rethinking the proven concepts.
In 2010, the so-called Forschungsgemeinschaft Kraftfahrwesen, translated Automotive Research Association in the German town of Aachen, published a study about what would actually be possible if truck length restrictions were relaxed and trucks with noses returned to European roads. The result: significant improvements in fuel efficiency, safety and comfort for truck drivers. According to the study, a truck with a rounded, streamlined nose would be more aerodynamic and fuel consumption could be reduced by 3 to 5%. The additional space would also enable better cooling and create space for new components, for example, waste heat recovery, which would further reduce fuel consumption by up to 10%. Apart from that, new security improvements would be possible. The additional cabin space could be used to eliminate blind spots, according to the study. And the new truck design could also prevent pedestrians and cyclists from being hit under wheels in a collision.
Anyway, the chances that we will see those long-nose vehicles on European roads in the near future are not so high. Even the new electro semi-trucks, the next generation of the semi-trucks, are cap-over vehicles. Which means, if I want to see those special long-nose vehicles, I think I still need to travel to America or switch on the TV. So, that was my video about American, but also European semi-trucks. I hope you liked it, I hope you learned something. If you did, please leave a thumbs up. You can also hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss any upcoming video. And if you like to support me and my work, you can also do that, for example, on Patreon. There's a link in the description, or you can become a channel member on my YouTube channel. There's a button somewhere here around the video. Then you will also get exclusive stuff and new videos before everyone else. So, and if you're wondering now, why the heck is he sitting in his studio and not in his car in the USA? Well, that was part number 1 of my USA road trip series. There will be a second part, but this part will follow in summer, so you have to be a bit patient. I'm back in 2 weeks on this YouTube channel anyway, but then with another video from Europe, to be precise, from London. So that will be fun. I hope you don't miss that video. Please subscribe to the channel, and then we will see each other back in 2 weeks, right at this place. Have a safe journey. See you next time. Bye bye.